Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. I have three messages for you today, so bear with me. What Sunday is today? Who said that? Linda. Well, our Sunday school. The Publican and the Pharisee. You remember what the publicans were? Tax collectors, despised people, right? And today is the first of the pre-Lenten Sundays. Today is the beginning of what we call the Triodion period that goes from now until Pascha. And what happens this week? No fasting. No fasting. You don't have to fast this week. I shouldn't tell you. You don't have to fast this week because it's the beginning of the Triodion. And we heard in the pre-Lenten Sundays about Zacchaeus, who had desire to see the Lord, and about the Canaanite woman who was fervent in her prayer and persevering in her faith. And today we hear about the Pharisee, who was a very righteous man. As a matter of fact, he was so good, he was telling God how good he was. I'm so good, I do this, I fast twice a week, and I tithe. And I'm not like that guy. I'm not like that guy. And the Lord said, who do you think is going to be saved? That guy. Because he wouldn't even lift up his eyes to heaven. And he said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. There's a Western saint called Thomas à Kempis, and he wrote this beautiful thing, and I'm going to use his quote. And I wrote it down because I wanted to get it exactly right. In The Imitation of Christ, he wrote, study always to be patient in bearing other men's defects. Study always to be patient in bearing other men's defects. For you have many in yourself that others suffer from you. In other words, bear with other people. Be kind to them. First of all, we don't know what they're going through. But whatever, don't look down on them, don't judge them, because people put up with our defects as well, and they have to put up with us. Not me, because I don't have it, but you guys. Guess who's going to heaven? So this is the lesson for today. Be kind to one another, love one another. We don't know what the other guy's problems are, what his defects are. But we are quick to complain and to judge. And let's not do that if we don't want to be judged or criticized ourselves. Second message was what Francis read this morning from the Epistle of St. Paul. And especially in this age, and you know that I've talked about this many times, about how times have changed, obviously, and how children are under very strange, weird, odd, I don't want to say queer because that would make it really difficult, influences. But St. Paul said to maintain that faith that you have been taught, what you have learned, what you've been taught, keep it and maintain it throughout, because faith and the Lord's teachings do not change with the times. We don't say, well, it wasn't good to do it then, but it's okay now. If it wasn't good then, it's not good now. Because Scripture says that Jesus is always the same, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And his teachings do not change. And he's asking us to maintain that faith like the Canaanite woman who preserved her faith, to preserve that faith and those things that we have been taught. And to not listen, as St. Paul says in another place, even if an angel comes down from heaven and preaches a different gospel, And he said, as if there is a different gospel, don't listen to him, because we've already been taught the truth and we know it, and Jesus has given us his word to maintain the faith. And I hope that we're able to do it here, at least, as a bastion of faith and of the traditional teachings of Jesus Christ and the church that he left through his apostles and through the church fathers. The third thing, today we are offering the Papandina, which is a Greek word, comes from the Greek word. It means the presentation of Christ in the temple, that icon there. On the 40th day after Christmas, Jesus was brought to the temple by his mother and presented with 2 turtle doves, or 2 white pigeons, because they were poor, they didn't have a lamb to offer. And they offered that to the priest and gave it Simeon, the priest, Lomozine to Simeon, was here today. Sorry, no, not here, okay, Lomozine. And to those who bear the name Simeon. And we read in the Vesper services from Exodus that the Lord had told the Hebrews that because the 10th plague to free the Hebrews from slavery to the Egyptians, the last plague that he gave was to take away the firstborn of the Egyptians, not only their children, but even of their animals, the firstborn. And he instructed the Hebrews to paint on their doorposts with blood of the Lamb. And the blood of the Lamb was put on, you put it on your door, here, here, and here. And if you connect the dots, it's the cross. And the blood of the Lamb, the blood of Jesus Christ, actually. It prefigured that. And that when the angel of death would come, he would pass over their houses that were marked with the cross and would not take their firstborn sons. So Passover, the word Passover comes from that. And also that the Hebrews passed over from slavery to freedom. They passed over the Red Sea. And for us as Christians, we still call it Pascha, Pesach, the Passover, because we pass over from death to life, and Christ gives us his resurrection. Now the connection with this is he told the Hebrews that on the 40th day after birth, they were to bring their children to the temple and make an offering. And we still do that today. The mothers come with their children on the 40th day and offer them to the church. And we do the churching of the children and the prayer over the mother. It's not quite the same as what the Hebrew thinking was, but it's a time of coming back into the church. And I mentioned that in the old days, a mother wouldn't go out for 40 days after she had a child. It was a time of bonding, and where women would go and visit and all sit around the bed. So in the afternoon, you had to have your bed made and everything was fine and the house was clean, because the women would come and visit and they would see you and talk with you, because you couldn't go out. You couldn't go to the mall. Well, there were no malls then anyway. You couldn't go anywhere. You didn't even come to church for the 40 days until you were churched. And the mothers would make tigun, those fried dough balls, and pass them out to people, because this was the announcement of good news. Now, we don't do that so much anymore. And I know women don't stay in bed for 40 days anymore after they have their children. They're out the next day, actually. But what was done in the old days, especially in Europe, because there was no ladies' auxiliary, women would make the boiled wheat and would take it to their friends, or they would invite the ladies and they would have a luncheon. So today, actually not today, but the February 2nd, the day of the presentation, which we celebrate today, becomes the patronal feast day of Mother's Day. You could call it the Orthodox Mother's Day. And it becomes the patronal feast of the Ladies' Auxiliary. There were no Ladies' Auxiliaries in Europe. This is something, it's an American tradition where the ladies get together. So, on Lee Avenue, way back, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, what they would do is boil the wheat and offer it to the Lord with the 5 loaves of bread. Offer it, and one lady or 2 ladies or a couple of families would get together and offer it for the community. And you would pray to the Lord for them and for the whole community and for the ladies' auxiliary. And for the ladies who weren't there, they would take And the ladies would give a donation for the good, and this way for the boiled wheat. And in this way, they became members of the Ladies Auxiliary. So if you don't become a member, you're going to get a knock at the door, and somebody's going to say, here's your wheat, become a member. We'll become like Jehovah's Witnesses for the Ladies Auxiliary. I'm only kidding. So what we do now is we do the good here, and it's distributed to all the people, to all the women. But it is their patronal feast day, and it is a Mother's Day, and a day for all women. We men can also celebrate. We also get some good to eat. It's okay, because we all celebrate the presentation of the Lord in the temple. And this is something that we still do. And we church on the 40th day, and we also church the child at baptism. I had a baptism last week, as I told you. It was a girl, and I took her in the altar. And there were people there from Europe who questioned why I would take a girl into the altar. Because in the Romanian tradition, when a church is consecrated, who can go in the altar on that day? Everybody. Men, women, and children. And they're allowed to kiss the altar, go into the altar, go around and kiss the altar table, and come out. Because it's such a holy day. On the day of baptism and chrismation, everyone is of the royal priesthood. Male and female, because there is no male and female in Christ. We're all one. So we do take the girls into the altar. And it's just an opportunity, a teaching opportunity for me again now to say, who is allowed to go into the altar? No, on other Sundays, not at the consecration. The priest, obviously. And who else? Who? Nuns, yes. Now, I'm glad you didn't answer men only. No. It's not men only. Men are not allowed to come into the altar. As a matter of fact, if you're not there for a function, you are not allowed to come into the altar. We could even put locks on the doors. You don't come into the altar to have a conversation with the priest. Men are not all allowed to come into the altar unless you've been given a blessing and have been given a function to do. Altar boys, those who serve, the bishop gives me permission to come. I give them permission to come. And widows are allowed, if they're given the function, to come in and clean the altar. But that's it. So we have to remember it's a very sacred place. It contains the Holy of Holies. And we're not there for shooting the breeze. We're there for the function, to worship God. I know I've given you a lot of information to digest today. I hope it's helpful. And that you'll remember it, so I don't have to repeat it again next week, right? Good, thank you. Thank you for being here. I know we're missing a lot of people today because of the 40th day at Holy Trinity. And we have a couple of guests today, and I welcome you. Thank you for being here and worshiping with us. I'm sorry we didn't have a full house for you, but this is the way it is. Today we have the General Assembly meeting after the offering of the boiled wheat and the 5 loaves. So please come down. We have pizza, I believe. We have pizza for the coffee hour. You can all come and enjoy that. And listen to the General Assembly. We'll discuss the problems